Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the Maxi back here again with another video. Today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin versus real estate. This is part one of a four-part series. This is a very personal series for me because I got my investment journey started with real estate. So I always saved up my money since I was a kid, and I bought my first investment property in 2020 at 21 years old. So if you listen to personal finance podcasts, anybody's advice, right? Everybody thinks get into real estate, right? That's the way you build wealth long term. You get into property. There's been many people that have, made a lot of wealth by buying real estate. So I ended up buying 4 rental properties. I bought 2 duplexes and 2 single family houses. One just snowballed into another. I did, rehab on one of them, redid the basements, refied into another property. So, yeah, I recently sold 2 of them for Bitcoin in 2023. That was a good decision. That was before I really understood what Bitcoin is. Everyone who gets into Bitcoin, it's a learning process, right? You don't just start out thinking, yeah, let me sell my house and buy Bitcoin. But the more you research and the more you learn about it, you come to that conclusion. So I'm in the process of selling my other 2 properties for Bitcoin as well right now. So this is part one of the series. This is going to be about the fact that I don't think real estate's risks are being priced in the market right now. So the first risk that you face when you own property, when you own real estate, is there's property taxes and there's politics risk as well. So when you own a property, you owe taxes to the government, right? Every year you have to pay your taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, they're going to take your house, right? So paying those taxes and coming up with that money is a risk, right? And I mean, honestly, if you think about it, how is that true ownership if you have to pay a fee basically to use the thing that you own, right? Or else the government's going to take it away from you, right? That's completely different from how Bitcoin works, and Bitcoin is true ownership. One could argue that when you own a house, you don't really own it. The government's kind of just letting you use it because they can take it from you at any time. The United States has respected property rights for a long time, but that's not always the case everywhere. If you live in the United States, you're very fortunate to have your property rights respected, but that's not the way it works everywhere in the world, right? And I mean, here's just one example. There's plenty of examples if you want to go look it up of governments not respecting people's property rights in terms of real estate. So from 1933 to 1939, the Nazis began the process of Aryanization, in which they confiscated and transferred Jewish-owned businesses and properties to people of German descent. Okay, so if you were Jewish, you had your property seized and stolen. Okay, so if you were storing your wealth in real estate from that time period, you just had it taken from you, right? During that time period, Jewish people just became the scapegoat. They became the group of people to blame, and any property that they owned was just stolen from them. They lost all of the time and energy that they stored up, right? You could have been a businessman and made lots of money and contributed to society a lot. And if you decided to store that time and energy that you put into real estate at that time, if you didn't see the political, sphere changing to where you were going to be targeted, then you lost all your wealth, right? You got it stolen from you. So this has happened many times throughout history. It's not just in Germany from the 1930s and 1940s. You can look it up. Happened in Russia. It's happened in many places, right? So if you contrast this to Bitcoin, the government cannot take your Bitcoin, right? If you have your Bitcoin in self-custody, which there's a difference between having your Bitcoin in self-custody and using a custodian to hold your Bitcoin for you, right? The only way that your Bitcoin can be taken from you is if you voluntarily give it up, right? They would have to knock on your door. They'd have to knock on the door of millions of Americans, millions of wherever you live, and say, hey, do you own Bitcoin? And you could just say, no, I don't, right? And even if you withdrew that from an exchange, you could say you lost the keys, right? I don't have it anymore. I don't have access to it. There's no proof that you have access to it, right? Versus if you own a property, it's sitting right there, right? They know that you own it, right? So, and there's ways that they can take it, even sudden increases in taxation can be a way that they can take your property without outright stealing it, right? If they just jack your property taxes up by 300%, they can kind of take your property, right? And I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm just saying that this is a risk that you face with real estate. And I don't think many people even assess these risks, right? I don't hear anyone talking about that, right? So insurance rates is another one. So this actually happened to me, right? One of my properties, my monthly premium went from $210 a month to $600 a month, right? And could I go to a different insurance company and try to get that lowered again, back down? Sure. Yeah, I probably could have, right? I just decided to sell it instead, but there is no right afforded to me that I am deserving of a low insurance cost, right? Insurance companies can decide, they're a business, right? They can decide that they need to charge a higher premium for the entire area, and that's it, right? You're paying a higher premium. So, yeah, I mean, this has happened in Florida, right? I mean, if you own housing in Florida, property taxes have gone crazy recently, right? So yeah, here you can see this. Florida's projected cost of property insurance averages about $11,000 a year, right? It's increased 72% in the last 5 years. And the amount of homeowners who can't even get coverage going up 400%. Okay, so even if you want to get insurance, that doesn't mean you're able to. Okay? That's another thing that I don't see people talking about is the insurance rate risks. So another thing with real estate is tenant risks, obviously. I mean, this is one that people definitely think about more, right? When you place a tenant in your property, and you kind of have to do this, right? You have to place a tenant in your property to try to generate cash flow. Otherwise, owning real estate doesn't make any sense at all, right? If you're not going to place a tenant in your property to try to offset the taxes and the insurance costs and the mortgage cost, then it really doesn't make sense, right? But when you place that tenant in your property, there's no guarantee that who you're placing isn't going to just destroy your property, right? They could just have a mental health crisis and just start destroying your asset, right? Where you've decided to store your time and energy in. And since it's physical and you have to put someone else and trust them in it, that is definitely a risk, right? They can do a tremendous amount of damage being placed in that property by themselves. Another risk with real estate, I think, is technology increases, right? So not many people are talking about this, but AI, we've seen AI rapidly improving, right? We've seen drastic improvements in just a year with AI, right? 3D printing houses is happening right now, right? What if, we're able to print houses out of concrete and you can get a fully customizable house and technology just rapidly improves to the point where we can make houses for $100,000, right? What happens to the average price of a home in America then, right? That is not being priced in. And that's a real risk that is being faced right now, right? That I don't think people are acknowledging. And I will give it to real estate people. If it is a truly scarce piece of real estate, right? If it is beachfront property, right, where there's not more of it being made, I think it has a better chance of holding its value, right? Even if a customizable house is going to cost $100,000, but it's still going to go down, right? If a customizable 4-bedroom, 3-bath house costs $100,000 and you just have to buy the plot of land, right? And land isn't really that scarce, right? It's not actually that scarce. Land where you'd want to live is a little bit more scarce, but just thinking out loud, like if it's $100,000 for this new beautiful home, that will drag down the price of real estate, right? It will crash the market pretty fast. And with how fast, I mean, we've seen AI, how fast that's improving, that's a real risk that the real estate market faces right now. Another one is buying in the correct market, right? When you buy real estate, you really have to buy in the right location, right? I mean, even real estate investors admit this. You can't just buy a home in some area that isn't growing, right? If you bought a home in Detroit, when Ford was super big there and it was a booming city and you waited 50 years, Detroit's not a great place to own property anymore, right? That wasn't a great decision. There's lots of things that can change the desirability of a location, right? There's schools, local governments, weather changes, from climate change. There's so many things that can change the desirability of a place. And so basically what you're forced to do is you're forced to speculate on what the future holds, right? You're forced to speculate, do I think that hurricanes are going to get worse in Florida, right? Because if you bought property in Florida 15 years ago, you might not even seen how many hurricanes are getting hit with coming, right? If you bought property, in LA like 20 years ago, that would have been a good choice, right? If you bought property in Austin 15 years ago, that would have been a good choice. But you're forced to speculate on where people are going to move, right? There's an added risk there for doing that. All right. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you disagree with something I said, if you want to know more about something I said, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe too if you enjoyed. And I'm going to do 3 more parts in this series. So make sure you subscribe so you can see those as well. All right.